You know, I don't even know where Nintendo came from. I'm not talking about the company or even the console release. I'm talking about the phenomenon, the happening where Nintendo became this presence that everyone knew about it. I knew about it, my friends knew about it, my family knew about it. I had no idea where it came from. Just suddenly it was in magazines, it was on television, it was on cereal boxes, and I knew I had to have one.
My first experience with Nintendo is probably the same as like so many other people's stories.
I was 3 years old. It was Christmas 1990. I unwrapped my very first video game console, the Nintendo Entertainment System. It was the NES action set, and I still remember the excitement I felt unwrapping that present for the first time. And this is the actual box here that it came in, the same one I unwrapped 25 years ago. This is what started my love for video games.
And I literally had no idea about the company right up until the moment I received the console Christmas morning 1992, which was a gift from my mum and dad. I guess this was because of the circles I was running in. I was playing a Sinclair Spectrum 128K plus 2 for years during the 80s. My best friend owned a Commodore 64 and a Sega Master System, and a few of my friends had already received the Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis as it's known in America. So this was the first ever time I laid eyes on a Nintendo product, but which started an incredible journey and a huge love affair for this amazing company.
I got a 3DS from Christmas that Santa gave me.
In 1989, for Christmas, my parents got me the Nintendo Entertainment System action set, which came, of course, with 2 controllers, the Zapper and Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. And I'm pretty sure like I had never seen a Nintendo before that. I had no concept of what they were.
I mean, I had played games before. I had played games on the computer, my mother's computer. I had played games on other consoles, my uncle's consoles. But the Nintendo, that was me, that was my console. That was the one that was tailored for me, for my generation.
Everything I learned and found out about Nintendo was through friends at school, stuff I overheard, commercials on TV, and eventually that stupid Captain N cartoon. I knew who Mother Brain was before I knew who Samus was.
So, it's 1985, and I'm 10 years old. I'm playing my Atari. I've got my Pac-Man, I've got my Pitfall, I've got my Space Invaders, my Asteroids. I'm content, life is good. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere...
So, I started walking to the basement, opened the door, and all of a sudden I started hearing these noises, like a ding and like boing, like jumping noises and stuff like that. Well, jumping noises that I didn't know were jumping noises at the time. But, so I go downstairs, and there's my aunt sitting on the floor, and the TV's set up down there.
And one of my uncles had bought the system, and when I walked in their front door, they were playing Super Mario Brothers, and my jaw hit the floor.
My aunt's just sitting there, and she's got this weird thing in her hands, like it looked like a remote control or whatever, but it looked like she was controlling what was on TV, and she was just like fixated on it, right? And I'm just like, I remember asking her, I was just like, what is that? And she says, it's a Nintendo.
You know what I'm talking about. So Nintendo comes on the scene, and much like the characters in their video games, they swoop in and they save the day from the evil video game crash.
I had been a lifelong Atari 2600 fan, and I think I was coming close to 10 years of playing Atari 2600, and I loved the Atari 2600. But there was a major problem at the end of its life where every single schlub out there was making cartridges for Atari, and the quality suffered tremendously. They were just giving away cartridges. They couldn't get rid of them fast enough because they were so bad. And video gaming definitely suffered. And then comes Nintendo, and they said, you know what, we're going to make quality games, and we're going to only filter certain games, and we're not going to allow just anybody to make it. We're going to put our seal on it to approve it. And it resuscitated the video game market for sure.
The NES was new. There were like, the adults were in there, the kids were in there, everybody was in there. Nobody had seen anything like that before.
So no longer do you just have a loose theme tied to your game. Now you have a game with a story, and you've got characters with backstories, and you've got games that are coming with maps that fold out, and you've got ways to save your progress, you got strategy guides, you got secrets within the games. It's a whole new world and a whole new idea as to how to play video games, and it was fantastic.
I saw all my favorite cartoon characters show up on there. I saw movies that I liked show up on there. I saw new franchises that were targeted for me and my friends. This was my console.
First game I ever played was Duck Hunt. I went over to my cousin's house, he had the NES there, and I vividly remember holding the zapper up to the TV and just blasting the ducks away.
This is also my original Super Nintendo. It's yellowed over the years, unfortunately, due to the plastics that they used. In America, they got a different model to what we got here in Europe. Ours was exactly the same as the Japanese model. The American model is more squarer and has the purple buttons for power and reset, and the buttons on the controller, which is really interesting. I guess it's something to do with marketing, but never really understood that.
I wouldn't trade this for anything else in my collection. This is by far the most valuable thing I have. Just to think that a quarter century ago I started this endeavor of collecting games, playing games, loving games, and this is what it's become, all thanks to the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now,
Sat down with her, started playing it, and I immediately was hooked. I couldn't stop playing, could not stop playing video games. As much as my parents kind of, you know, they weren't really into video games, and they didn't really like my addiction, I guess, so to speak. But from then on, I was a gamer, and that's the way it was. So,
what a great company! I'm not gonna lie to you. I may be a Sega fanboy, but if it wasn't for Nintendo, Sega would never have come over here. Thank God for Nintendo. Thank God for them.
I didn't even get it right away. My friends had it. My cousin had it. I begged and pleaded my mother. I wanted a Nintendo so bad. But it took a while. I had to save. I had to earn it. I had to behave. And finally, one day, just the way Nintendo started, there was this big happening where it just was there. It wasn't there before, and now it was there. That's how it ended up in my living room. I don't know if it was Christmas, I don't know if it was my birthday, I don't know if it was the end of the school year. All I know is I got it, and I was happy.
Nintendo was just a huge part of my childhood. It was the first introduction to gaming for me, and the Super Nintendo was the first console I ever played. It was in my family just as long as I can remember.
My first experience with Nintendo, well, it's actually kind of hard to remember the exact first time, because as far back as I can remember, my earliest memories from my childhood are of Nintendo. I remember standing right up in front of the TV and with that zapper and shooting the ducks and not figuring out why people weren't getting as close as I was, because I was hitting them every time. Why would I want to miss? I remember fighting my way to the last castle in the original Mario Brothers and not being able to figure out the maze because my 4-year-old brain just couldn't wrap around it. These are my earliest memories of not just Nintendo, but of my childhood. I remember using a twine off of a newspaper package and pretending I was, you know, one of the Belmonts in Castlevania. The very first video game I ever purchased was Star Tropics, and I had to sell my own toys at a yard sale to get it because I wanted it that bad. And yeah, those are my earliest and probably most fondest memories of Nintendo, and that was right from the start.
You know, needless to say, my life changed that day that I met the NES, and it hasn't been the same since.
Well, it took me a long time to get over the fact that I was finally able to play what all these other kids were going on about.
Every time I moved, there was one friend that we all already had in common, and that was Mario.
I think it all started with Mario Brothers.
Super Mario Brothers, like the whole series.
Of course, Super Mario and Mario Brothers.
Other times, playing Super Mario World for the very first time, a Super Mario game for the very first time. What an experience.
And I remember popping in Super Mario Sunshine on Christmas morning and thinking, my god, this is the best I will ever see. There will never be graphics like this in the past, present, or future. Amazing.
As an Italian-American myself, I was pretty dang proud when Nintendo came out with Mario Brothers and Super Mario, and he's a fellow Paisan, so that's a good move, Nintendo.
Cracking that open, setting it up on the big screen TV, like not my bedroom TV, the living room TV, playing Mario 64, that is definitely the one moment that I can pinpoint as being like, I love everything about this company.
There are so many fond memories of playing different Nintendo games and stuff like that. I can still remember getting my Super Nintendo. I can remember the first time I beat Super Mario 64, all that. But I'd have to say my most fond memory is GoldenEye 64 on the Nintendo 64. That game got so much play in my house, it's unbelievable. My friends would bring over their controllers, I'd set up the game, and we would just play multiplayer deathmatch for hours and hours. Not to mention all the great solo campaign and all the challenges and stuff like that in it. I can still remember when I got invincibility mode. That was such a hard thing to do. But just the hours and hours of multiplayer with my friends, I mean, we just played that game to death.
My fondest memories of Nintendo would be having a load of mates round, get some pizza, Coca-Cola, sweets, and just veg out for an entire evening playing on the Nintendo 64, 4 controllers and a copy of GoldenEye 007.
Castlevania.
Of course, the original Castlevania.
One of my favorite games for the Game Boy Advanced was Aria of Sorrow, the Castlevania series. I've always loved Castlevanias from its very get-go. But that game was really great because I remember playing Aria of Sorrow on the subway every day for I don't know how long, a month or so, to and fro to work. And I would just get in my zone. And there are people that would read a book and kind of block out the world. But for me, it was playing Nintendo on the subway. And we would have street performers juggling in front of me and people nudging you and sleeping on your shoulder. And you just got so into that game. It was a world unto its own.
Metroid Zero Mission.
You know, playing Super Metroid the first time, it was, you know, it wasn't so much wonder as much, it was just dread. There's so much atmosphere in that case.
I can't even explain how I feel when I hear that. Oh man, whenever I hear that Metroid theme.
And I had to get Super Metroid, so I got myself a copy of Super Metroid. It was actually that copy of Super Metroid right there. Not the Super Famicom one, but this one, right, the Super Nintendo one right there. And I just, you know, it's a classic story. It was the only game you had, and you just played it front to back over and over and over again. And it just blew my mind because, you know, for me, video games, there was the arcade stuff where it took place on one screen. There was the Mario stuff where you start at the beginning and go to the end. This was a game where you could just go anywhere. You can go back and forth. You can explore the worlds, and it just blew me away that this was on a Nintendo console. You know, I had stuff like Doom and Quake that I played before, but this was something different. This was something magical.
I think Super Metroid is probably the finest 2D action game ever made, and I will stand by that until the day I die.
Well, that's Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars. This game, I remember bringing it home. I put it in the console, I turned it on, and at the time there weren't memory cards. All of the saves were save files. And I remember the top one, it was Jake.
Life Force. God, I love Life Force. To this day, I still can't beat it, but I'll play the hell out of it.
One of the fondest memories of mine to do with Nintendo is watching my brother play Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! Now, as a kid, and I think most of us can agree, when you first start playing when you're a kid, you suck. So this was one of those games where I couldn't get past the second guy. I couldn't get past Von Kaiser. So when my big brother stepped in and would take on each of these guys and keep going, I remember sitting there. We did it in a night, and I was sitting there the whole time enthralled, waiting to see who the next guy was. The character design was just so great in this game, and it was a good bonding experience with my big brother. And you know, we'll always have Mike Tyson's Punch-Out.
I remember playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out and really being impressed that Nintendo actually put in the gap in Mike Tyson's teeth, because I have a gap in my teeth. So I was utterly impressed by the graphic power of those of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Not to mention that the game was a lot of fun to play too.
And Zelda 2.
Zelda 1, 2.
The reveal of Ganon at the end of Ocarina of Time. Absolutely insane.
My favorite character is from Nintendo is probably Link from The Legend of Zelda, just because he's very adventurous, and I really like how he has a sword and shield, and he's like, yeah, he's the bomb.
Zelda: A Link to the Past. Wow, another one of my favorite games on the Super Nintendo. And another favorite game of all time, really.
I like Princess Zelda because she has a lot of cool, like, powers. You know, she has, like, I think it's a sword. She has, like, in Super Smash Brothers, she breathes fire out of her hand. Like,
their arcade ports were incredible. And I remember saying, oh, this is as close to the arcade as you're ever going to get.
Being a fan of arcades and arcade games, I knew the final nail was in the coffin for arcades when Super Nintendo came out and they could play games that looked as good as an arcade game. And I knew it was over. I remember seeing Street Fighter and just saying that it looks perfect. That's it. It's done for. Arcades are over, and they certainly were.
Right. I mean, these games were fantastic. Stuff like Zelda, stuff like Metroid. I mean, I was just in love with the music, the production of these games. I mean, even though at the time when I finally got an NES, it was the late 90s, there was still a lot of value in those games. And the Super Nintendo was, I mean, that was my jam for a long time. You know, because that was all I could afford.
They're a lot more bright and kid-friendly, I think, than, like, you know, Microsoft Xbox games and stuff like that.
Here's the thing about Nintendo. You always know a Nintendo game is going to be great. It's going to be polished. It's going to be finished. It's going to be fun. It's going to invoke feelings of nostalgia. Nintendo is quality.
Things I've loved. Now, there's a subject. Everything.
It would actually be a shorter list if I thought of things I didn't love about Nintendo. I guess you could say I'm a fanboy. But that's
2 words. Game Genie.
Cranking up the volume on my TV so that it would shake violently after every boss battle in Star Fox 64.
Like Metroid, like every single game they put out just kind of turns to gold.
There's just something about Nintendo that it's always going to be a part of gaming for me. The NES was the first console I ever received that was ever my own. The last console that I bought before leaving the US was a GameCube. And after coming to Japan, the first and second consoles that I bought here were the Famicom and Super Famicom. I just trust Nintendo.
They're a family-focused company.
But that doesn't mean that grown-ups don't love it, or older kids or people don't love it, because they're still really fun, but it's not always geared just towards a older audience.
Which, you know, I think it's cool that they can make games that appeal to all ages.
The thing that I loved and still love is the accessibility of a Nintendo game. Anybody can pick up one of their games and with, like, minimal effort learn how to play it. I don't mean the games are easy, because that's not the case. Everyone at some point has said that game is NES hard. I just mean that you don't have to go through a ton of tutorials to learn how to play it. Usually, you know, within a couple of minutes, you know how to play the game. Also, the games are bright and colorful and exciting, and I think that gets lost a lot today.
For the first time, you could modify your gameplay with this device for the NES, which coined the term Nintendo Hard. It was a huge help to youngsters that wanted to see the end of games and just couldn't get there on their own. Also, pre-internet era, and I was Nintendo subscription list, I would live vicariously through reading these books, like just trying to get an idea of how the game was playing just based on the codes in it.
Nintendo never ceases to amaze with its concepts of what it thinks a game system should look like. Not just what it plays, but physically what it looks like. They've had the Nintendo Game Watches, they've had the Virtual Boy, which was like a spectacle thing that you put on your head and you stuck your head in there. The GameCube was physically a cube! It was a freaking cube! And they took risks. From different sizes to different concepts, from the clamshell to getting rid of the clamshell and having something like the Game Boy Advanced that fit more like a game pad in your hand, then going back to the clamshell with the DS. So they were always innovating on design.
They've been so consistent over the years throughout the generations from the Pong stages to the 8 bits to the 16 bits, 64, the GameCube, the Wii and the Wii U. They really have gone on an amazing evolution, and they've ever strived to provide us with really entertaining games and different ways to sort of interact with them, like the Wii for a perfect example.
The controllers were always brilliant. The NES is about as minimalistic as you can get, but it worked perfectly, and they still do. You can throw those controllers into a garbage compactor, they'll still work.
The letdown that was the Power Glove. We would set it up and it never worked properly. You'd sit there trying to punch and it would just not work out for you. And also we had Rob the Robot, and trying to have all those pieces with a whole bunch of kids around the house, trying to keep those pieces all together, forget about it.
Right now, I hesitate to call myself a Nintendo fanatic at the same time that all of my favorite games are Nintendo games. I don't have a Wii U yet, and that's kind of embarrassing, but I really want to get one. But like since the N64, you've got Nintendo systems to play Nintendo games, and they've always stayed good with some exceptions like Mario Sunshine, but there's a level of quality that you get in Nintendo games. They've put together a brilliant team of developers, designers, producers who know how to make something that does appeal to everybody, but is still really fantastic. You can look at any of their 3DS games, any of the stuff they've been putting out for the past 3 or 4 years since the Wii U and the 3DS hit, and they've got that sweet spot where everybody likes it, but it's also like a genuinely like solid, interesting work of art.
Whenever I had like a bad day or something like that, I could just slip into a completely different world and just lose myself for a while. And that all started with Nintendo.
But my most fond memory was we didn't have any furniture, and all we had was an air mattress in the bedroom. So my girlfriend would be sleeping beside me on the air mattress because she would work in the morning and I would work late at night, and I would sit on this and play on Super Nintendo, Super Metroid on this small 14-inch TV. And she'd be lying beside me. I'm like, isn't this bothering you or anything like that? She's like, no, I'm enjoying it. I'm just enjoying listening to you play. And still to this day, if I play Super Metroid, she'll come into the room, she'll sit beside me on the couch, and just watch me play. And I'd be like, you want to play something or that? She's like, no, I'm just enjoying watching you and listening to the music. So that's hands down my favorite memory, my favorite Nintendo memory.
And here's two 12, 13-year-old kids looking through the English dictionary trying to find every possible word that would work with this letter combination. And we couldn't do it. And I remember going downstairs, I was really upset, I was crying, and I was sitting on the couch, and my mom asked, what's wrong? What's wrong? Why are you so frustrated? I said, I just can't figure this out. I've been trying for so long, and I can't do it. And she said, let me help you, and she looked, and within seconds, she had said, Pearl.
We had just gotten an N64, but we didn't know it yet. Me and P1 were in our house, and our parents had just got home with groceries. And we were pretty excited just for the fact that we had some groceries. It was great. And once everything was inside, my parents said, there's one bag we left out in the trunk, would you mind going to get it? And they were speaking to me, and I said, nah, I didn't really want to do it. I was busy, I had just started on a game, actually. And I was like, no, I can't, you know, P1 do it. And so he did, nice guy. And he went out and got it. When he came back, it wasn't groceries, it was a boxed Nintendo 64 with Mario 64. So needless to say, I was pretty excited. Only to find out that I had to wait for my turn because since I wouldn't go out and get it, P1 got to play first. This was a lesson that I learned that day, and I almost never say no to anybody anymore, so it's probably hurt me in the long run.
The Wii in particular, I think Nintendo really hit the nail on the head by bringing everyone together in the family. It was a real social experience, and it did incredibly well. It was the first time that you could get everyone off the couch, like my mum and dad and my wife, all together playing a video game. Before that, unheard of. I couldn't think of one day. I really couldn't. Everyone playing a video game without having to hold a controller and asking what buttons do this, when you could just swing the remote around the room. Brilliant.
I've always loved just about everything about Nintendo. They're a company that is completely focused on one thing, and that is the games. They're not focused on hardware and making really powerful hardware. They're focused on making new, unique, and fun experiences in their video games, and they've always had such high standards. I can't even think of a Nintendo game, maybe aside from the CDI games, which I don't even, no, they weren't even developed by Nintendo, so I don't really count those. But Nintendo games, first-party Nintendo games, have always been rated really high. Everyone loves them. And I can't even think of a first-party Nintendo game that people don't like.
I like the Nintendo because it has a lot of cool characters in it, and my daddy has been playing it since he was a little kid. It's really old, and it's just fun. They have so much games for it. I really like it.
Their games are all really fun, and like Mario, and they've made great classic games, but also their newer games are still really fun.
And that's what I love about Nintendo. They're so creative, and their innovation is excellent. And I think they put that through their characters, and you know, it really sort of shows the progression of the company, and especially like their main franchises like Mario and Zelda and Metroid and Star Fox and Kirby. Yeah, okay, I know they use them over and over again, but they're excellent games. Every single console that comes out, they have ever strived to improve them, make them more fun, entertaining, find new ways for us to interact with those characters, especially during the Wii and the Wii U at the moment. And that's what really excites me about Nintendo. They just know how to get you excited about games, entertain you, have fun, and keep you wanting more. And that is Nintendo.
Nintendo is a company that's going to be around forever, regardless of whether they continue to make game consoles or not. If they continue to release fantastic first-party titles, they're going to be around forever. People love the games, and they're an iconic company. Everyone knows who Nintendo is. Everyone knows who Mario is. And there aren't too many companies that can say they have a mascot that, regardless if you're a gamer or not, you know who that mascot is. Everyone knows who Mario is.
I think Nintendo has like staying power. They've been around since my dad was a kid. They saved the video game industry, and they're still around today.
Everything is different now. The video game industry has changed so much since they launched the NES. Gamers are different, demands are different, the way people approach games is completely different. But Nintendo still feels the same.
I feel like they're really starting to ramp it up. I mean, the Wii U's out, they're just destroying it. Mario Kart, Smash Brothers. I love Smash Brothers, I'm going nuts about it.
Okay, current day Nintendo. I still love Nintendo, don't get me wrong. It actually saddens me that people are so hard on them when there's really no need. They're still fantastic. The games they release are great. I'm looking forward to old franchises that we haven't seen in a little while. I'm hoping that they release their Star Fox game soon, and I really can't wait to hear news about F-Zero or Metroid. But you know what? Modern day Nintendo is the same as they were back then in my mind. They're getting a lot less third-party support from developers that only aim for one particular game or one particular group of people. And those are the people that I don't really care if they're making games for Nintendo or not. They can keep doing what they're doing, and the people who are playing on the Wii U and the 3DS, those are the kind of people that I relate to most. So it doesn't bother me that they get all this hate from people who love Activision and EA, because Platinum is a much better third-party developer in my mind anyway. So modern day Nintendo, I hope they just keep doing what they're doing, and I'm sure all the naysayers will have to turn over a new leaf, especially after the lineup they had this year and coming up next year. So yeah.
You're gonna edit that out, huh? Sorry. I'm trying not to swear in this video.